I don't care who you think you are, this vehicle is in violation and you need to move it now.
Ma'am, I am the assistant director in charge of the FBI.
Stop right there. I'm calling 911. The words hit me like a siren before the siren even came. I turned from my garage door halfway closed to see her again. Karen Holbrook, president of the Silver Ridge Estates, HOA, standing at the end of my driveway like she'd just caught a fugitive. Phone raised, lips trembling with a rehearsed outrage. "You're hiding something in there," she shouted, the accusation echoing down the quiet cul-de-sac. I saw the lights, the machines. "This is illegal activity." I just stared at her, still holding the garage remote in my hand. The quiet, reliable hum of the door motor filled the silence between us, a mechanical heartbeat against her manufactured panic. "Karen," I said evenly, my voice calm, a low-frequency anchor against her high-pitched drama. "This is my home, and that's my garage. I'm fixing a motorcycle." She didn't blink, her gaze fixed and unwavering, the expression of a person who believes her conviction is proof of guilt. "We'll see what the authorities think," she declared, her finger already tapping the screen to dial. As the distant wail of approaching sirens echoed through the perfect, manicured silence of Silver Ridge Estates, I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled to myself. She had no idea who she'd just called the police on. Completely oblivious to the fact that her petty, localized authority was about to collide with a very different, far more absolute power. There's a reason I bought the corner lot with the towering maple tree that leans over the cul-de-sac like an old sentinel. On late summer afternoons, the shadow it casts lands squarely on my driveway, turning my garage into what it was always meant to be, a small, honest workshop where a man can take something broken and make it whole again. That's all I wanted from Silver Ridge Estates. Quiet shade, the deep, satisfying smell of warm motor oil, and the simple, meditative satisfaction of setting a 74 Norton Commandos carburetor right. I didn't come here to make a point, to challenge authority, or to start a fight. I came here to disappear into an ordinary life, to trade in the high stakes, life or death pressure cooker of my former career for the predictable, low-stakes drama of suburban retirement. Most mornings I'm up before dawn. 52 does that to you? The body wakes first, the mind follows at its own deliberate pace. I brew coffee, open the side door, and let the cool air roll over the concrete floor. The garage is where my world narrows in a way I like pegboard tools organized by size. A red steel box with drawers that sound like a reliable hymn when they slide. The Norton Commando on the stand, polished by a dozen patient Saturdays. There's a radio with a bent antenna tuned to a classic rock station that goes to static whenever the kitchen blender kicks on. It's a life measured by small clicks, soft whirs, and the honest scent of grease and metal. The neighborhood, however, sells a different story. The Silver Ridge Estates brochures feature families on bicycles, an unnaturally cheerful golden retriever that seems union required, and houses wearing tasteful tans and grays identical except for the porches where rocking chairs, like silent sentinels, keep watch over very similar lives. The HOA rules, or as they insist on calling them, the guidelines, arrived in a binder thick enough to stop a small caliber bullet. 2 approved mailbox designs, acceptable shrub heights measured to the millimeter. No commercial activity of any kind, and the rule that would become the flashpoint of my retirement. Garage doors must remain open no longer than 15 minutes at a time unless actively loading or unloading. I remember reading that last one, leaning back in my office chair, a wry smile touching my lips, and thinking, who measures this? Who has the time and the inclination to police a clock on a door? It didn't take long to find out Karen Holbrook introduced herself on day 2. I was on a ladder, installing a new light fixture in the foyer, when I heard a knock that wasn't a request, but a firm assertion of presence. When I opened the door, her smile was already arranged. The kind that suggests agreement is inevitable and discussion is merely a formality. She was in her mid-50s, hair sprayed into a helmet of meticulous, almost architectural significance, a cardigan the color of sherbet, and a slim binder cradled like a newborn the HOA Bible, her nameplate, attached to the cardigan with a magnetic clasp. Read President because, of course, it did. "Welcome to Silver Ridge, Mr. Cole," she chirped, her voice too bright and too loud for the hallway. "We value neighbors who value standards." I told her I did generally. She congratulated me on buying in during a competitive season, a phrase that sounded suspiciously like a warning dressed in a compliment. Then she thumbed the binder open with a practiced, dramatic flourish and ran a perfectly manicured finger down a page until it arrived. Thwack, at section 14.3b, exterior work visibility. I see you have some equipment in the garage, she said, her eyes already darting past me and into the dim workshop, as if spotting contraband. It's a beautiful space. We simply ask that resident projects remain tidy, she paused over the word, tasting its self-righteous flavor and private. We don't want to inspire copycats. I promised I wouldn't corrupt the block with adjustable wrenches and honest sweat. She laughed a musical trill with sharp edges. When she left, I noticed she'd slipped a glossy pamphlet into the crack of the door. Keep Silver Ridge safe. On the back was a list of phone numbers, including hers in bold, report issues 24/7, and the non-emergency line for the local police. The first number was circled aggressively in pink highlighter. The first month passed in small, irritating frictions. A yellow note appeared after I watered the lawn at noon. Best practice is before 9 a.m. or after 6 p.m. sun waste. Another note for a garden hose visible from the street. Visual clutter. Another about my trash can lid not fully closed. Containment protocols. Each one was signed with a looped K that managed to look cheerful and accusatory all at once. I taped the notes above the workbench like a growing collection of miniature warrants. It amused me at first, this pageantry of control, but the novelty thinned with each new slip. What did you do to her? Asked my neighbor Leah during a Saturday block yard sale. She and her husband Ken had a table of baby clothes and a sign that read, "Everything must go," which felt ominous for a marriage but apparently referred only to onesies. I closed my garage, I said. Ah, she winced. You're one of those. One of what? Men who like doors? She whispered conspiratorially. She says doors send messages. What kind of message? Ken, appearing with a box of plastic dinosaurs that had somehow survived biblical floods, answered for me. That you have something to hide? In this zip code, privacy is suspicious. We laughed, but not for long. Silver Ridge trained you to speak quickly in public, like a ship's crew under constant watch. People here smiled the way you smile with a hand hovering over your car horn. It wasn't a threat. It was a readiness. I learned the rhythms of the HOA, the way you learn the squeak of a floorboard in a new house. Monday mornings, Karen jogged the loop in pastel leggings, pausing to photograph any unmotivated or slightly yellowing grass. Wednesday nights were for board meetings at the clubhouse, light refreshments and heavy sighs. Friday afternoons, she sat on the bench under my maple tree with an iPad, tapping notes like she was composing an opera titled Order. She loved the word order. It was the wax stamp on her letters, the text on her tote bag, the sign on her office door in the clubhouse. Order is kindness. I had a different definition. Still, I can be civilized. I waved when we crossed paths. I nodded when the newsletter praised vigilant leadership. I trimmed the boxwoods just enough to satisfy someone who believed greenery had moral implications. I kept my classic rock radio low. I logged work hours that began strictly after 8 a.m. and ended before 6 p.m., staging my retirement for the theater of neighborhood goodwill. I did all of it not because I feared enforcement, but because I was trying an experiment. What if, just once, I let ordinary life happen to me? Even so, the notes escalated. The font grew bolder. The language turned from polite suggestions to formal citations. One morning, I found an envelope taped to the garage. A formal notice of violation with 3 boxes checked: noise, unapproved activity, safety concern. Attached was a quote from Section 9.2, no resident shall operate or appear to operate a business from the garage or premises. Beneath that, a blurry, zoomed-in photo of me hunched over the Norton, the garage door halfway down to keep the glare off the chrome. A caption in Karen's sharp, slanted handwriting, "Visible work suggests commerce." I took the notice to my neighbor across the street, Priya, who had a lawyer's posture and a gardener's hands. She read it, her mouth a flat line. "This is bluster," she said. "A garage isn't a storefront just because a human stands in it. Keep the door where you want it." "Tell that to the president," I said. "I have." She quotes scripture from the bylaws and calls it law. Priya looked at my face and softened. "If you need me at a meeting, I'll come." But be careful. She's looking for a fight to win. There's a move people learn when they want to control you. They force you to explain yourself. Every conversation becomes a deposition you're destined to lose because you refuse to dignify the premise. When Karen stopped me one evening, timing her jog perfectly to intercept me at the mailbox, she led with that move. "What is it you do in there?" she asked without greeting, nodding toward the garage. "Fix things," I said simply. "Fix what? Metal? Mistakes? Time?" She frowned like I'd answered in riddles to evade a lie. "Are you licensed for fixing time?" "No. You think this is funny?" "I think it's a garage." She lifted her phone, a reflex by now, and snapped a photo of my face. "Documentation," she said, the word landing with the smugness of a zealot. "Residents have a right to feel safe." "They do," I said. "And they have a right not to be harassed." Her smile turned sharp, predatory. "Harassment is a legal term. So is trespass." That night, the newsletter arrived in everyone's inboxes with a new initiative, Neighborhood Watch 2.0, a call for vigilance against garage-based activity that may undermine property values. Under it, a stock photo of a wrench laid over caution tape. Subtlety was not a tool the president kept in her belt. I tell you this not to paint myself as a hero. Heroes are loud, and loud is easy. I'm a quiet man with an old radio who likes his bolts organized by size. I've spent decades learning to live inside patience, to hear the sound a room makes before someone lies in it. Silver Ridge was supposed to be a break, but breaks are fragile. They split wherever pressure finds them. Pressure found me 3 ways at once: the notes, the newsletter, and the looks. Not everyone gave them. Most of my neighbors have better sense, but the few who did glanced at my garage, like it was a rumor with a roof. A young mom steered her stroller a foot farther from my drive. A teenage boy filming for a class project panned over the door and whispered, "That's the guy." The smallest slights do the deepest work. They turn you foreign to the place you pay for. I called the number on the pamphlet once, the non-emergency line. I asked the board dispatcher what constituted illegal garage use. "As long as you're not running a chop shop, you're fine," she said. "Define chop shop. You would know if you were running one." "I'm not." "Then you're not." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't want permission. I wanted sanity. On the Thursday before the sirens, I left the garage door down for 20 minutes. It was raining, the kind of persistent drizzle that makes sidewalks reflective and dishonest. I was soldering a wire harness for the commando and needed the humidity low and the temperature steady. When I finally hit the button to open up, the maple tree had gathered 1,000 points of light on its leaves, and Karen was standing under it with a phone, filming my door as it rose. We held each other's eyes the way fencers touch blades, testing the gap. "I timed it," she said, her voice a low, triumphant hiss. "I hope you beat your personal best," I said. It was 20 minutes. 15 is a guideline, I said. "Not a curfew?" "Rules are rules." "So is gravity," I countered. "Still, we jump." Her jaw flexed. Some of us care about standards. Some of us care about lives. I shouldn't have said it, not because it wasn't true, but because she didn't come here for truth. She came for victory. And I'd handed her a provocation masquerading as poetry. She walked off, fingers already flying over the screen. I went back to the bench and stared at the solder cooling into a shiny scar. You learn to read people by how they process defeat. Karen's processing style was escalation. That night, I laid out parts on a clean towel, like a surgeon staging a second chance, and told myself, don't react. The universe has its own calendar. If someone insists on meeting the law head first, you don't push them. You step aside and let them run into the wall they built. In the morning, I brewed coffee, opened the side door, and watched steam rise like a small forecast over the mug. The Norton caught the light through the window and looked briefly like it wanted to be new again. I smiled at the thought and pressed the remote. The garage door came down with its steady hum. In the narrow slit of bright that remained, I saw a silhouette at the end of the driveway. A woman with a phone and a grievance already rehearsing her lines. The door settled. The world clicked into a different chapter. By nightfall, the binder would come out. The notes would turn into threats. And the words that opened this story would rip the air again, louder this time, because now there would be an audience. But in that quiet moment, just me, the coffee, and the last inch of daylight, I did what I always do when a storm decides it loves me. I took a breath, measured the space between impulse and action, and chose to be ordinary for one more minute. It wouldn't last. People like Karen don't permit ordinary. They mistake calm for confession. They mistake doors for secrets. They mistake a man repairing something for a man preparing something. And when they make enough mistakes, something else wakes up in me. Not anger, not pride, just the old, trained patience of a person who knows exactly what to do. When someone points at a garage and says the word illegal like it's a spell. This is how the madness began, with a binder, a stopwatch, and a woman determined to turn peace into a performance. And it is how it will end, in a room with better lights, better rules, and a different kind of door. It started on a Saturday morning so ordinary it could have been copied from any suburban postcard until it wasn't. The sun was still low, hanging like a tired coin over the rooftops, and the air smelled of wet asphalt from the sprinklers that had just finished their chore. I had the garage open halfway, radio humming through an old Fleetwood Mac track, when I heard the sound that always meant trouble in Silver Ridge, the sharp, deliberate click of high heels on concrete. Karen Holbrook was marching up my driveway again, binder tucked under one arm, phone in the other. She looked like a lawyer on her way to prosecute a garden gnome. Her sunglasses were large enough to double as riot shields, and her mouth wore that thin, compressed line that said she was one sentence away from a formal complaint. I didn't even look up at first. I'd learned that acknowledging her too soon only fed the drama. But Karen didn't believe in subtle entrances. She cleared her throat with the power of a public address system. "Mr. Cole," she began, her voice brittle with manufactured authority, "you were informed about the garage use restrictions last month. Section 9.2. "Yes, Karen, I remember," I replied, my voice muffled as I reached for a wrench. "And yet here you are again, with the door half closed." "It's sunny," I said simply. "Chrome and sunlight don't mix when you're working on a classic. It causes glare." She took a photo. "I'm documenting this. There have been reports, credible reports, of suspicious activity coming from your property." I laughed, a low, quiet sound. "Suspicious activity? You mean engines?" She stiffened, the movement radiating disapproval. "You know what I mean. People saw strangers visiting late at night." "UPS," I offered. "Or maybe raccoons." Karen's jaw set like drying cement. "If you won't take this seriously, I'll have to escalate. We can't risk someone operating an unlicensed business or other things." "Other things?" I repeated, setting the wrench down and finally turning to face her. "You mean terrorism? Arms dealing? Counterfeit lemonade?" Her lips twitched, but not into a smile. The joke had landed, but she couldn't afford to acknowledge it. She raised her phone higher, transforming it into a badge of vigilant surveillance. "Step back from the garage, please. I need to record this properly." "Karen," I said, my patience finally thinning, "you're filming a man fixing a carburetor. You don't need a warrant or a witness. You need a hobby." That was the wrong move. Her nostrils flared. Her finger hovered dramatically over the phone screen, searching for the ultimate escalation. And then came the line that detonated the last piece of peace in Silver Ridge Estates. "Stop right there. I'm calling 911. I froze, more out of disbelief at the sheer absurdity than any actual fear. "You're calling the police because I closed my garage?" "I'm calling," she declared, her voice reaching a theatrical crescendo, "because you're acting hostile and possibly armed." "Armed?" I repeated slowly. "With a wrench?" "Yes, I see metallic objects," she insisted, leaning slightly to peer into the workshop. "And you raised your voice?" "I haven't raised my voice," I said softly. "Not yet." But she was already talking to the dispatch operator, pacing in tight, furious circles like an actor rehearsing a climactic scene. "Yes, hello, this is Karen Holbrook, HOA President of Silver Ridge Estates. We have a male resident barricaded inside his garage. Possible weapons. Acting erratic." I almost laughed out loud at the word barricaded. The door was half open, sunlight pouring in like a spotlight. She had the subtlety of a fire alarm. "Ma'am," I heard the dispatcher reply faintly through the phone. "Is he threatening you?" "Not directly, but I feel unsafe. He's glaring." "I'm squinting," I said helpfully. She ignored me, turning her back and raising her voice. "Yes, please send someone quickly." We have children here. I sighed, grabbed my mug of coffee, and leaned against the workbench. Somewhere between the absurdity and the caffeine, I found a deep, settled calm. I'd been through bigger storms than Karen Holbrook's imagination could conjure. When you've spent decades in federal service, listening to real emergencies, negotiating with people who truly meant harm, you learn to measure danger by silence, not volume. And Karen was pure, unadulterated volume. The distant wail of sirens began about 5 minutes later, slicing through the calm Saturday morning like an unwanted, discordant soundtrack. Within moments, 2 police SUVs turned into the cul-de-sac, lights flashing, a spectacle in this carefully curated suburban bubble. Curtains fluttered across every window as the entire neighborhood tuned in to the latest HOA drama episode. Living free of charge? Karen waved frantically at the approaching vehicles, pointing toward me like she'd just identified a national security threat. "That's him," she cried, her voice cracking with self-importance. "He's the one. Don't let him close that door." I took another sip of coffee and, with deliberate slowness, pressed the remote. The garage door slid down smoothly until only a foot of daylight remained. I heard Karen gasp, as if I had detonated something. The officers approached cautiously, hands near their belts but not yet drawn. One of them, a younger man with a polite, weary expression, called out, "Sir, can you step outside, please?" "Of course," I said. I lifted the door the rest of the way and stepped into the light, mug still in hand. Karen practically dove behind one of the police cars. "Be careful," she shouted. "He's unpredictable." "He's too calm?" The young officer glanced at me, then at her, then back at me. I could see the question already forming behind his eyes. Is this real, or is this just Tuesday in an HOA? "Sir," he said carefully, "we got a call about a barricade situation." I smiled. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only thing barricaded here is a faulty carburetor." The other officer, older and with the kind of posture that said he'd seen every flavor of suburban nonsense 1,000 times, peered into the garage. "Looks like a normal setup," he drawled. "Tools, bike, coffee. No hostages." Karen stepped forward again, visibly offended, her helmet of hair not even slightly disheveled. "Of course you'd say that. He probably hid everything before you arrived. Look at his demeanor. Cold, evasive, trained." The older cop raised an eyebrow. "Trained at what? Something military?" "Maybe, I can tell." "He's too calm?" "Ma'am," the officer said, his tone flat. "You realize calm isn't a crime. It should be when it's suspicious." The younger officer bit his lip to keep from laughing. "Do you have any evidence of illegal activity, ma'am?" Karen hesitated, which was rare for her. "I heard noises. Mechanical ones. At night." "That's what garages do," I offered. She flushed a deep, angry red. "This neighborhood has standards. There are bylaws." "Bylaws aren't laws," I offered, still calm. "Stay out of this," she snapped. "Trying to," I said. The older cop stepped between us. "All right, let's dial this down. Sir, can we just see some ID for our report?" "Sure." I reached into my wallet and handed over my driver's license. He looked at it, then at me. I could tell he recognized the name, but wasn't sure why. He hesitated, his eyes lingering on the Director Emeritus status subtly printed on my other ID cards tucked behind the license. "I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Cole. We'll file this as a false alarm." Karen's voice rose an octave, verging on a shriek. "False? Are you saying I fabricated a crime?" "I demand you investigate further." "Search his property." The younger officer's patience was finally thinning. "Ma'am, without probable cause, we can't just—" "I am probable cause," she yelled. "I'm the HOA President." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's not a federal title, Karen." "Enough from you," she snapped, turning her full fury on me. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? Well, I'll find out who you really are." That line stuck with me. "I'll find out who you really are." The way she said it, like she was promising vengeance rather than expressing curiosity, hit a chord I hadn't heard in years. It reminded me of interrogations where the suspect said too much without realizing it. There was something behind her obsession, something beyond control or gossip. The officers left after issuing her a firm warning about false emergency calls. Karen stood in the street, shaking with furious energy, her eyes burning holes into my garage door as it lowered again. I finished my coffee and looked at her through the narrow gap as the door met the concrete. For a moment, her expression shifted. It wasn't anger. It was fear. Not of me, but of something older. The kind of fear you only see in people who know exactly what they're capable of and are terrified of being discovered. When the sirens faded and the neighbors retreated into their curated normalcy, I sat down on my stool, elbows on my knees. My reflection in the metal door looked like a man who'd lost count of second chances. I'd promised myself not to bring work home, not this version of work. But Karen's words echoed through the quiet. I'll find out who you really are. What she didn't know was that curiosity is contagious. So I opened my laptop, typed her name, Karen Holbrook, into the federal database, not the public one. The one with layers the average citizen never sees. The one that whispers secrets instead of shouting facts and waited for the internal wheel to spin. The file came up almost blank. Too blank. Her background check was scrubbed cleaner than a politician's biography. No employment records before 2009, no property ownership before Silver Ridge, no aliases, no traffic tickets. Perfect, and in my world, perfect is impossible. I leaned back, fingers steepled, the old instinct creeping in like an uninvited friend. Files like that don't appear naturally. They're made, which meant someone had cleaned her record. And people who get their records cleaned have something substantial to hide. The garage, the notes, the 911 call, all of it suddenly felt smaller, like noise hiding a signal. I wasn't dealing with a meddling neighbor anymore. I was dealing with someone who'd spent her life pretending to be ordinary. And I knew exactly how to find out why. That night, as Silver Ridge slept under its perfectly spaced streetlights, I drafted an email to a trusted contact in DC, someone who still owed me a favor the size of a small carrier ship. I kept it short. Need a deep pull on a Karen Holbrook, Silver Ridge Estates. Possible alias. Start with sealed state records, early 2000s, then I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the radio hum. Karen thought she'd called the cops on a stranger. She had no idea she just declared war on the Federal Bureau of Investigation. When you've spent a lifetime tracking liars, you develop a sixth sense for the ones trying hardest to look clean. That was Karen Holbrook. Every inch of her life in Silver Ridge screamed perfection. The pastel house, the manicured roses that somehow bloomed out of season, the way her mail never sat in the box for more than 20 minutes. Everything was too polished, too rehearsed, too flawlessly aligned with the HOA's obsessive standards. But the blankness in her official record, the void where a life should have been before 2009, that was the real giveaway. People like her don't live spotless lives. They just hire better janitors or they strike a deal with the system itself. I didn't want to pull that thread at first. I had come here to retire, not to reopen old habits. But something about her, the aggression, the paranoia, the fundamental, unsettling need to control everyone and everything around her felt familiar. I'd seen it before, reflected in the two-way glass of an interrogation room. When people with deeply buried histories got a taste of power, HOA bylaws were just her new, locally sourced badge of authority. And when she called 911 on me for closing a door, that badge became a weapon pointed straight at me. 2 days after the barricade incident, my contact from DC, Agent Harper, pinged me through an encrypted channel. Harper and I went way back to my counter-organized crime days. Sharp mind, sharper instincts, and absolutely no patience for bureaucratic nonsense. Harper pulled your Karen, weird file. State ID exists, but pre-2009 there's a sealed record flagged by the DOJ Privacy Act. I'd need clearance from above your old pay grade to unseal it. I smiled wryly at the screen. Me, that's funny, Harper. Above my old pay grade would be me, exactly. Want me to nudge the archives? Me, do it, and look for prior aliases. This smells like identity laundering. Harper, roger that. I'll dig through the weeds. This is officially the dumbest case I've worked since the guy who tried to steal a tank by driving a forklift. I chuckled. It felt like muscle memory coming back. Quiet investigation, cross-referencing names, reading between redacted lines, except now the suspect wasn't a mob accountant or a cyber ring boss. It was the woman sending me violation letters over trash bin placement. That night, I sat in my dim garage, the laptop casting a pale, cold glow over the Norton's chrome tank. The house was silent, except for the faint ticking of the ceiling fan and the persistent chirp of the cicadas outside. I opened my email again and scrolled through old bureau access codes, fingers hesitating over the keyboard like a priest about to break a seal. Retired or not, I still had director-level clearance that could override almost any low-level privacy flag in the system. I typed in the long string of authorizations, exhaled slowly, and pressed enter. The system resisted for a long, agonizing moment, then unlocked. What appeared wasn't a clean dossier, but a fractured one, like someone had taken scissors to a newspaper and taped only the safe words back together. Name, Carolee Hallman. DOB redacted. Criminal history, classified under State Rehabilitation Program. 2003, notations, violent offense dismissed due to procedural error. Affiliations, under investigation for financial fraud. 2006, charges dropped. Notes, subject relocated under sealed identity protection order. Reason, undisclosed. I leaned closer, the blood running a little colder in my veins. Identity protection orders are reserved for two types of people: key witnesses who put their lives on the line, or dangerous manipulators who cut deals to save their own skin. Judging by Karen's new life, running a suburban AO like a personal dictatorship, I was betting heavily on the latter. The next entry chilled me more than I expected. 2003, Baton Rouge Police Department. Incident: aggravated assault in connection with hate-motivated altercation at Miller's Bar, 3 hospitalized. 1 weapon recovered. Suspect, Cara Hallman. Outcome, sealed by state court, expunged after 24 months. I sat back, the air suddenly thicker. Karen, the woman fining people for untidy garden gnomes, once swung fists in a hate-fueled bar brawl. People don't change like that. They adapt. They build a more refined disguise. Her HOA presidency wasn't civic duty. It was control therapy, a way to legally channel her obsession with dictating other people's behavior. I took notes, the old habits coming back with disturbing ease. A pattern was emerging. 2003 assault. 2006 fraud. Both sealed. A new identity in 2009, then a perfect, controlling neighborhood in 2014, every few years a reset. That wasn't random. That was a system. Somebody high up had helped her bury that past. And that meant leverage. The next morning I met my neighbor Priya on her porch. She was trimming rosebush, her hands gloved, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. Big excitement last weekend, she said, clipping a spent bloom. You're a local celebrity now. Not the kind of fame I wanted, I said. She's been bragging about it, you know. Telling everyone she caught a criminal in the act. Did she mention the part where the police apologized to me? Does Karen ever mention apologies? I hesitated, then asked, how long has she been president? 5 years. Won the vote after the last guy moved out? She's persistent. Scared 3 candidates off before the election. Why? I'm trying to understand her history. Priya snorted. History? She doesn't have one. Or that's what she says. Moved here from up north after a divorce? No kids, no records, no relatives. The kind of person who arrives one day fully formed like a bad idea. That confirmed it. Karen's story wasn't built. It was manufactured that night, Harper called. You were right, he said without preamble. She's not just Karen Holbrook. That's an alias tied to a suspended nonprofit, Sunline Community Initiative, flagged for suspicious transfers 6 years ago. Guess who signed those checks? Let me guess, Karen. Bingo, she funneled HOA funds into the nonprofit. Then the nonprofit paid shell contractors that never existed. Classic laundering loop. Small scale but efficient. Amount? About 120 grand? Enough to matter. Harper paused, a significant silence stretching over the line. There's more. Her brother, Stephen Hallman, popped up in a racketeering case in Arizona. Member of the Ridgewell Order. I frowned, my eyes closing in concentration. That hate group? Still active? And guess who posted bail for him back in 2005, right before the charges were dropped? The silence answered. When I hung up, I realized the weight of what I was holding. This wasn't HOI drama anymore. It was a ghost operation hidden in plain sight, run by a woman who used neighborhood bureaucracy to launder money and control perception. And she'd picked the director of the FBI as her next scapegoat? The next day, I attended the monthly HOA meeting for the first time. Karen was at the head of the long oak table, framed by an American flag and a vase of artificial lilac. Her binder sat open like a Bible. "Oh, Mr. Cole," she said, her voice sweet as corn syrup. "How brave of you to show up after last week's incident." "Just here to learn," I said, my voice quiet. "I like knowing how justice works around here." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Justice? We prefer order." The meeting rolled on with reports about landscaping, pool schedules, and naturally, ongoing safety concerns regarding unauthorized garage activity. Each line she spoke dripped with theater, but I wasn't listening for content. I was watching reactions. Several board members shifted uneasily when she mentioned budgets, especially when she referenced community improvement grants. One man at the end, Leonard, avoided her gaze entirely. Afterward, I caught him in the hallway. "How long has she been handling the finances?" He hesitated, lowering his voice. "Since before I joined. She says transparency is handled internally, but I've never seen a ledger. She does it all herself. You ever asked to see one?" "Once," he said, swallowing hard. "She threatened to fine my daughter for leaving a scooter on the sidewalk. And then she brought up my wife's medical bills somehow. Said it was about risk management for the community. Classic intimidation loop. I'd seen cartels use softer versions of the same tactic. Make the punishment personal. Keep people compliant." I thanked Leonard and left, my mind buzzing. The pattern was clear. Control the rules. Control the fear. Control the money. But something else bothered me. The photo from the 2003 assault report. Harper had sent a grainy black and white shot of a woman half a lifetime younger. The face was the same, but the eyes, those eyes were wild, unhinged. The same eyes that glared at me when she screamed, "Stop right there." She hadn't changed at all. She just found a legal, suburban outlet for her violence. Later that night, as rain began to tap softly against the window, I organized the data. Fraud, assault, laundering, identity change, hate group ties enough to bury a career if she ever had one left. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. Clean, factual, irrefutable exposure. The kind that doesn't scream it, but simply speaks the truth and watches the world rearrange itself. So I planned the next move. I would build a paper trail she couldn't deny, every transaction, every falsified grant, every HOA dollar misused. I'd request copies of community invoices through the transparency clause buried deep in the very bylaws she worshipped so much. I'd trace them to the dummy corporation Harper found. And then, when the board saw it with their own eyes, she wouldn't be able to scream harassment or misunderstanding. The law would speak louder than her voice ever could. I leaned back, the Norton gleaming beside me. Funny thing about garages, they're where people fix what's broken. Karen thought she was the law here. She had no idea she'd picked a fight with the man who used to write the laws she broke. And as the rain turned into a steady drumbeat, I whispered to the silence, "Let's see what you're hiding, Madame President." Because if she'd spent her life erasing her past, I was about to become the one person she couldn't erase.
There's a certain pleasure in letting your opponent dig their own hole. You don't have to push. You just clear the weeds around it and wait for gravity. That's exactly what I did with Karen Holbrook. She was too arrogant, too consumed by her own theatrical performance of authority, to imagine that anyone could out-bureaucrat her. And arrogance is the most predictable, most exploitable flaw in the human catalog. The day after I uncovered her full past, I spent the morning studying the HOA bylaws she adored. Each page was a symphony of half-legal nonsense written by people who thought reading a contract once made them attorneys. But buried in section 12.4 was a beautiful little instrument of her self-destruction. All members may request access to association expenditure records with 72-hour notice. Karen quoted bylaws like scripture, which meant she couldn't object to my request without contradicting her own faith. I drafted a polite email, professional and utterly devoid of tone. Dear President Holbrook, in the spirit of transparency and to confirm our community's fiscal health, I'd like to review the past 2 years of HOA financial records. I'm sure you'll agree this demonstrates our shared commitment to order. Warm regards, Daniel Cole. Within 15 minutes, she replied. Mr. Cole, your tone is noted. Records are available upon written request at the next scheduled meeting. Page. The phrase, your tone is noted, was her passive-aggressive trademark, her attempt to assert dominance where none existed. I almost laughed. People like Karen mistake politeness for weakness. They don't realize it's the sound of the fuse burning quietly. 3 days later, I arrive at the clubhouse with a leather folder under my arm and a small, high-quality recording device clipped discreetly inside my jacket. I wasn't there as an FBI director. I was there as a bored neighbor who just happened to know how to build a case file that can end a career and put a criminal behind bars. The room smelled of stale coffee and fresh anxiety. Karen sat behind a folding table with 2 board members, Leonard and a timid woman named Ruth. A stack of thick, neatly bound binders sat beside her. Mr. Cole, she said sweetly, her smile fixed but brittle. I trust this is about putting our little misunderstanding behind us. Exactly, I said, smiling back. I just want to understand where my dues go. I'm sure everything's in perfect order. Her eyes narrowed. Searching for a hint of sarcasm, I refused to give. Of course. Silver Ridge maintains impeccable records. She slid a binder across the table. Inside, receipts and invoices were arranged with almost artistic precision. Landscaping contracts, maintenance bills, community event expenses, all properly dated. Too properly. If you've ever handled forged documents, you know the smell of fresh toner and unnaturally uniged paper. Half of these pages look like they were printed yesterday. The ink hadn't even faded where it should have. Impressive, I said, flipping through slowly, deliberately. You keep backups, I assume? She tensed. Naturally. Off-site. Mind if I make some copies for my notes? Just the largest expenditures. That won't be necessary, she said quickly, snatching the binder back. These are internal documents. Under 12.4, I believe members are entitled to duplicates. Her jaw tightened, a small muscle twitching in her temple. You've read the bylaws. I like literature, I said. The moment stretched. Leonard coughed into his hand. Ruth pretended to check her phone for a signal that wasn't there. Karen smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'll prepare summaries, she said, finally. We wouldn't want confusion from misinterpreting technical data. Of course, I said. Standing up, numbers can be tricky. I look forward to reading your summaries. I left the meeting with nothing physical, but everything I needed. Her nervous tone, the evasions, the sudden decision to rewrite transparency into censorship. Every lie she told would soon serve as its own affidavit. That evening, I met Harper online. We cross-referenced the vendor names from the binder against federal tax databases. Out of the 11 listed contractors, 5 didn't exist. 3 were registered to a P.O. box in Arizona, the same town where her brother's company operated. 1 matched the Shell landscaping business tied to the Ridgewell order investigation. Classic layering, Harper muttered over the line. She's routing HOA money through fake invoices, washing it in her brother's firm, then funneling it into the Ridgewell fund. Small potatoes, but criminal all the same. Can you trace the transfers? Already on it. Give me a week. I didn't have a week. Karen was escalating again. The next morning, I found another envelope taped to my garage. Violation notice. Non-compliance with conduct standards. Below, in aggressive red ink, harassment of HOA President. She'd filed a formal complaint accusing me of intimidation and aggression during the records meeting. It was almost beautiful, the audacity, the self-incrimination. I kept the notice, dated it, and smiled. Her attempt to frame me would become the perfect cover for the actual setup. That night, I began building the trap. The plan was simple. Karen needed to believe she'd caught me breaking a rule, so she'd rush the document on camera, as was her standard operating procedure. Once she crossed the line into trespassing or illegal surveillance, I'd have physical proof of the local sheriff and my internal task force. And if she'd tampered with the HOA funds, her reaction under pressure would open the final door to prosecution. I started by baiting her curiosity. I parked my pickup truck half inside the garage, half outside, with a stack of blank banker boxes marked property files on the workbench. On top, I placed a generic black USB drive labeled Grant Reports. This was a decoy. It contained only one file, a document titled Audit Summary, Sunline Community Initiative. Inside the file, invisible to the naked eye, was a digital tracker, a small, sophisticated piece of code that would ping Harper's server the moment anyone copied or opened it. Then I waited. By noon the next day, Karen was there, standing at the edge of my driveway, pretending to photograph a clump of weeds that clearly fell outside of the HOA's jurisdiction. I pretended not to notice. My back to her, she lingered, pacing, glancing toward the open garage and a neatly labeled USB drive. Eventually, she left, her posture stiff with frustrated curiosity. That night, Harper called. We got a ping. Someone copied the decoy file at 6:17 p.m. from an IP registered to the Silver Ridge HOA office. Specifically, a computer running a very outdated OS in the president's private office. Got her, I said quietly. She broke into the system and downloaded what she thought was my personal work file, proving I was hacking her. Careful, Harper warned. She's volatile. Don't push too fast. I'm not pushing, I said, a genuine smile forming. I'm inviting gravity. 2 days later, she snapped. I was sanding a piece of maple wood in the driveway, creating a controlled cloud of dust, when her white Lexus screeched to a stop. She jumped out, waving a printout, the decoy file. You think you're clever, don't you? She shouted, planting false documents to frame me. You fabricated this whole nonprofit story. Good afternoon, Karen, I said, brushing sawdust from my shirt. That's a serious accusation. Did you just say I planted false documents? Which ones, exactly? You know which ones. The Sunline audit. I know you hacked the HOA files. I don't have access to HOA files, I said calmly. You do. Why would you assume I have your files, Karen, unless you looked at mine? She froze for half a second. It was just enough. The confusion, the sudden realization that she had just confessed to accessing my USB drive. Her face flushed a deep, mottled red. You're manipulating this community. You're a menace. You mean auditing? You're dangerous, she shrieked, grabbing her phone again. I'm calling 911. I sighed dramatically. Again? This is getting repetitive, Karen. This time I didn't bother stopping her. I wanted witnesses, and I wanted a legal chain of custody established by the local law enforcement. When the officers arrived, I greeted them with a fresh mug of coffee and a recording of her last unhinged visit. One of them, Officer Lane, was a bright young man who'd attended a basic federal operations briefing I'd given years ago. He recognized me immediately and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod that said, I know who you are. I'll play along. Everything okay here? Lane asked. I believe Miss Holbrook is upset, I said. She's accused me of hacking the HOA system. Perhaps she can explain how she found data from my personal computer on her device. Karen blinked. What? No, I didn't. He's twisting. Do you have a device, ma'am? Lane asked, cutting her off, his voice firm but gentle. The one you use to download the data you claim he fabricated? Ah, yes. But those are fabricated files. He's a liar. Then you won't mind if we take a look, he said, extending his hand. Her confidence collapsed like wet cardboard. This is harassment, she hissed. Ma'am, he said gently, hand over the device. She did. Within minutes, the digital tracker verified itself. Harper confirmed remotely that her phone had accessed the decoy USB and transmitted the data to her office computer. Chain of custody, time-stamped. Exactly what I needed. Karen's voice trembled. You set me up. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just gave you the opportunity to follow through on your own suspicion. She backed away, eyes darting toward the officers. He's dangerous, she whispered. He's not who he says he is. Lane looked at me, then back at her. Ma'am, do you know who he is? No, she snapped. Some mechanic pretending to be... Ma'am, he interrupted, his tone shifting from gentle to professional steel. I'd recommend you stop talking. She frowned, confused, the first real look of uncertainty I'd seen on her face. Why? Because I do know who he is. For the first time since I'd moved into Silver Ridge, Karen Holbrook looked completely, irrevocably defeated. The officers left with her phone for evidence. She drove off a few minutes later, pale and shaking, the present authority reduced to a crumpled piece of paper. That evening, Harper called again. We followed the money trail. The HOA's main account fed directly into the Sunline Fund, then into 3 personal checking accounts under her alias. It's airtight. We have the fraud, the identity theft, the assault, and now the obstruction. Good, I said. How soon can we move? Federal warrants are being signed now. Tomorrow morning. Local and federal. I looked around my quiet garage. The Norton, the tools, the fading smell of coffee. It felt like a chapel before a storm. Let's end this cleanly, I said. Any regrets? Harper asked, only that it took me this long to start. The next morning, the cul-de-sac woke not to the sound of lawnmowers, but to the low, purposeful rumble of unmarked cars. Agents and windbreakers, moving with the quiet precision of a well-oiled clock, surrounded Karen Holbrook's pastel-colored house. It was dawn, the time when most secrets prefer to sleep. Karen stepped onto her porch in her usual pink blazer, a mug in her hand, her eyes wide with shock. She tried to assert herself, tried to use the only power she knew. "You can't be here," she shouted, pointing a manicured finger at the nearest agent. "This is private property. I'm the president of the HOA. There are bylaws." When they read her rights, the clear, concise language of the law cutting through her theatrical hysteria, she tried to shout about HOA sovereignty, bylaws, and conspiracies. No one listened. Her voice, once so terrifying to her neighbors, was just noise now, static against the roar of justice. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, their mouths open in disbelief. For once, Silver Ridge was silent, observing a real, undeniable authority taking precedence over manufactured kind. As they placed her in the car, she met my eyes across the street. I stood on my driveway, leaning against my truck, a fresh mug of coffee in my hand. There was no anger this time, only a chilling recognition, the kind you see when a predator finally realizes its prey was, in fact, the hunter. I raised my coffee cup in a small, silent salute. "You wanted order," I said softly, too far away for her to hear the words, but close enough for her to read the expression. "Now you'll have it." The car door shut with a solid, definitive thud, the sound echoing the final closure of the case file. The car rolled away, and for the first time since I'd moved here, I heard the sound I'd been waiting for: silence. The morning after Karen Holbrook's arrest, Silver Ridge Estates looked like a movie set after the crew had left. The lawns were too perfect, the air too still, and every open window hummed with whispers. People didn't mow that day. They stared. The HOA president, the woman who fined children for sidewalk chalk and cited retirees for wind chimes, had been handcuffed on her own porch at sunrise. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like paperwork waiting to happen. I spent that morning the way I always do when the storm passes, organizing the fact before motion has time to grow claws. The file on my desk was thick now. Falsified invoices, financial trails, the sealed criminal history, and Harper's verified chain of custody from the digital tracker. The federal warrants were executed cleanly, with minimal noise. She was being held at the county detention center, pending fraud and identity theft charges. Still, I knew the storm wasn't over. When corruption hides in plain sight, exposure doesn't end it. It simply wakes it up. By noon, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I wasn't surprised. Panic always arrives in minutes when power disappears. The clubhouse smelled of old coffee and guilt. About 30 residents filled the folding chairs, their faces pale and confused. Leonard sat near the front, clutching a folder like a life vest. Ruth wrung her hands, whispering prayers into her tissue. At the front of the room, the vice president, a man named Harold Bishop, tried to maintain some semblance of control. "Everyone, please," he said, his voice trembling. "We'll begin shortly. Let's keep this professional." Professional? The word had lost all meaning in this place. When I stepped inside, conversations froze. Someone whispered my name like I was part myth, part grenade. I nodded politely, took a seat in the back, and waited. Harold cleared his throat. "As you all know, President Holbrook has been temporarily detained pending investigation into certain, financial irregularities." Temporarily? A woman near the front snapped. "They took her away in handcuffs. Harold, federal agents." "You think that's a misunderstanding?" Harold blinked rapidly. "Let's not rush to judgment. We don't have all the facts." "We have the video," another man shouted, holding up his phone. It's all over the neighborhood page. FBI agents. Federal warrants. You think that a misunderstanding. The room buzzed. I could feel the heat rising. Harold raised his palms. Please, we'll address the facts once they're verified. In the meantime, we have a guest who can help clarify certain matters. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Cole. I live on Maple Court. Until last week, most of you probably knew me as the garage guy. A few nervous laughs scattered across the room. Turns out that garage was more useful than anyone realized. I walked to the front, opened my folder, and placed several pages on projector stand. The screen behind me glowed to life with spreadsheets and dates. These are the financial transfers from your HOA account over the past 3 years, I said, my voice calm and authoritative, instantly cutting through the noise. Roughly $120,000 in community funds were redirected through a nonprofit called Sunline Community Initiative, a company with no employees, no physical address, and no service history. That nonprofit, in turn, sent payments to a landscaping firm registered to Stephen Holman, Karen's brother. Every dollar was disguised as maintenance, tree trimming, playground upgrades. None of those projects ever happened. You all paid for them. Harold swallowed hard. Mr. Cole, how did you get this information? Let's just say I have some experience in investigations, I replied. Someone in the back stood up. So, she was stealing from us all this time? Yes, I said, and she was doing it under a false name. Her real identity is Cara Holman. She has a sealed record for aggravated assault, prior fraud charges, and confirmed ties to a hate group investigated for financial crimes in 2006. That's public record now. The seals were lifted this morning. The room erupted. Shock, anger, disbelief. Every flavor of betrayal poured into the air at once. She fined me for painting my fence beige, a man shouted. She made me replant my garden because the tulips were the wrong color, cried another. She told me my disabled son's wheelchair ramp was a violation, a woman sobbed. I waited until the noise died down, letting the weight of the truth settle. I know, I said quietly. She did a lot worse to others. But what matters now is that you all know the truth. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Leonard rose shakily from his chair, clutching his life vest folder. Mr. Cole, are you with the police? I hesitated, then decided it was time to end the mystery entirely. The power fantasy they craved had to be completed. Not exactly, I said. I'm the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence that followed could have rewritten physics. Mouths hung open. Someone actually dropped a pen that hit the floor like a gunshot. Harold blinked repeatedly, his eyes wide and vacant. The FBI? Yes, I said. I moved here to retire quietly. Didn't expect to find federal-level corruption hiding in a cul-de-sac. The laughter that followed wasn't humor. It was cathartic relief, the kind that bursts out after months of being held hostage by fear. Ruth stood up, her voice trembling but stronger than before. So, she was one of them. A criminal. Not anymore, I said. Now she's a case file. The meeting ended with people swarming me with questions. Some cried, others apologized for believing her stories. A few were angry at themselves for staying silent. I told them what I tell victims in every case. Silence isn't weakness. It's survival until the truth has a witness. By evening, local news vans lined the street. A reporter shouted, Director Cole, can you confirm the charges? I can confirm that the law applies to everyone, I said, even those who hide behind homeowners' bylaws. The news clip aired that night. FBI director living in quiet suburb busts HOA fraud ring. By morning, HOA president linked to fraud and hate group was trending across social media. Silver Ridge had officially gone viral. But for me, the work wasn't done. Harper called from D.C. She's talking, he said, trying to cut a deal. Claimed she was laundering for someone higher up. There's always someone higher up, I said, already tracing the connections in my head. Track it. You realize you just became the most famous man in suburban America. I'd rather be anonymous. I sighed. Too late. You're a meme now. I smiled faintly. Fantastic. That weekend, the HOA board held another meeting. This one was open air under gazebo. It felt symbolic. Sunlight replacing secrecy. Harold stepped down as acting president, citing emotional exhaustion. The board voted unanimously to dissolve the current leadership and start fresh. When they asked me to run, I laughed. Trust me, I said, you don't want a federal agent managing your block party. Instead, they elected Priya. She accepted with a humble smile and immediately proposed reforms. Public financial transparency, a fair complaint system, and limits on presidential power. The crowd cheered. For the first time, Silver Ridge felt like a neighborhood again. As the meeting ended, Priya approached me. You know, she said, her eyes serious. You could have left it alone, moved away, let her destroy herself. I could have, I said. But corruption only destroys itself if someone shines a light long enough. She smiled softly. You'll stay for a while then? Someone has to make sure the lights stay on. Later that evening, I sat in my garage, the same one that started all this. The Norton's tank gleamed under the single hanging bulb. The air smelled of oil and pine shavings. Peace, at last, had a sound again. I opened the window. The night was cool, the street quiet. Across the cul-de-sac, kids rode scooters, their laughter echoing where Karen's voice used to bark orders. Someone was grilling steak. Somewhere a dog barked, not an alarm, but a joyful sound because it could. On my workbench lay the final copy of the HOA file, stamped and sealed by the Bureau. I'd add it to the archives. Next week, another case closed, another ghost unmasked. Before I shut down the lights, I poured one last cup of coffee and stepped onto the driveway. The stars hung over Silver Ridge like new promises. My phone buzzed. A message from Harper. Harper, nice work. Clean, takedown. Community owes you. Me. They don't owe me. They owe themselves. Harper, you ever think about coming back, Emmy? Me. No. I think about staying human. I put the phone away and stared down the quiet street. In the faint reflection of my window, I saw the man I used to be. The one who chased criminals across borders. Then I saw the man I'd become. The one who finally found peace behind a garage door. Both versions nodded at each other in understanding. Then I pressed the remote. The door rolled down slowly, sealing away the past, the evidence, and the ghost of arrogance. The motor hummed steady and sure until it clicked shut. For the first time, the sound didn't mean defense. It meant closure. Silver Ridge slept easy that night, and for once, so did I. The sound of justice isn't the clang of a gavel or the click of handcuffs. It's quieter. Paper sliding into folders, signatures drying in blue ink, the hum of truth finally filling the space where lies used to live. That's what Silver Ridge felt like in the weeks after Karen Holbrook's downfall. An entire community learning what silence really sounds like, a silence born not of fear, but of confidence. She can go quietly. People like her rarely do. Even from county detention, she kept up her performance, mailing handwritten statements to the HOA board, claiming she was a victim of a targeted political smear by a federal operative with a personal vendetta. She accused me of hacking her computer, of planting evidence, even of harboring resentment toward women in positions of authority. I'd read worse fiction. What mattered wasn't what she said. It was what the evidence said, louder and more unequivocally. The investigation that started in my garage had become a multi-state financial case. Harper's team traced funds from the Ridgewell order to 3 other HOAs across the Southwest, each with its own president connected to the same fraudulent network. What we'd uncovered wasn't just neighborhood corruption. It was a money laundering ring hiding behind the most boring disguise imaginable. Suburban order. You don't hide crime in chaos. You hide it in predictable, unchallenged rules. The DOJ sent me weekly updates out of courtesy, though technically I was still on sabbatical. Karen's arraignment drew local media and 3 network reporters hungry for the words. FBI director victimizes HOA president. But the headline never came. Instead, they ran with the truth. Suburban HOA exposed as front for fraudulent charity network. When the footage aired, it was almost surreal, watching her in an orange jumpsuit, hair frizzed under fluorescent light, still trying to control the room. This is all a misunderstanding, she told the cameras. That manipulated evidence. He's using his position to. The deputy shut the door before she finished. 3 weeks later, I was subpoenaed to testify at her preliminary hearing. I hadn't stepped inside a courtroom in nearly 2 years, but the smell never changes. Old paper, stale coffee, tension. The judge was a calm woman with half-moon glasses and a tone that could slice through granite. Karen sat at the defense table, wrists chained, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness, but still sharp. When she saw me walk in, her expression flickered between hatred and disbelief, like she was still convincing herself this was all some nightmare that good posture could fix. The prosecutor, a young attorney named Mendoza, began simply, "Director Cole, can you tell the court why you began investigating Miss Holbrook?" "Because she called 911 on me for closing my own garage," I said, letting the irony breathe in the courtroom. A soft, knowing laugh rippled through the gallery. Even the judge smirked. Mendoza nodded. "And what did you discover as a result of that incident?" "That her 911 call wasn't the only false report she'd ever made." I outlined the timeline. The sealed records, the fraudulent transfers, the alias switch, the digital evidence, the tracker. I spoke calmly, not as a man she'd antagonized, but as a professional I'd spent decades becoming. The facts did the talking. Karen tried to interrupt twice. Once she yelled, "He's lying." The judge warned her. The second time she stood up mid-sentence, shouting, "You don't know what they did to me." Her attorney tugged her back down like a handler with an angry show dog. When it was over, the judge thanked me for my clarity and dismissed the court until sentencing. Karen stared at me as they led her away. Her voice was smaller now, cracking. "You ruined everything." "No," I said softly. "You did. I just took notes." The sentence came 2 months later. 8 years for fraud, identity theft, and obstruction. No bail. Restitution of $92,000 to the HOA and $280,000 in federal fines. Probation for 5 years after release. It wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. The community moved on slowly, like a wound learning how to scar. Some neighbors repainted their houses. Others stopped locking their mailboxes. The sense of paranoia she cultivated began to fade, replaced by small acts of rebellion that felt like freedom. Kids playing basketball after 9 p.m., lawn chairs left out overnight. Music at barbecues turned up just a little too loud. Priya, now officially HOA President, implemented Open Books Fridays, where anyone could come review financial records with free coffee and no fear. The first week, no one showed. By the third, half the block came. Transparency had become the new rebellion. She asked me to join the board. I declined again, but I helped quietly, reviewing policy drafts, mediating disputes, setting up cybersecurity for the HOA systems. "Consider pro bono," I said. "Federal rehab therapy." But even peace comes with echoes. One afternoon, a plain manila envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single glossy photograph. Karen, standing beside a man in a black suit outside a charity gala bannered with Sunline Community Initiative. Scribbled on the back were 2 words, "Still missing." I sent it straight to Harper. Within hours, he called back. The guy next to her, that's Richard Hale, former accountant for the Ridgewell Order. Skipped his trial in 2010. Been off the radar ever since. You think she was still working with him? Wouldn't surprise me. These people recycle identities like paper towels. We'll dig. The thought left a chill I hadn't felt in years. It meant the network was larger than we'd uncovered, maybe even national. Harper wanted me to come back full time. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I sat in my garage again. The Norton gleamed in silence, but I couldn't focus on it. The air smelled different. Colder, more alert. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe instinct, but I could feel eyes on the house. Old habits die hard. I checked the motion cameras in the perimeter. Nothing. Still, I knew better than to assume nothing meant safety. I opened the photo again, studying the faint reflection in the gala window. A third person, barely visible, watching from across the street, too blurry to identify. I scanned the image, ran facial recognition. No match. Just another ghost. The next morning, Harper emailed. "We're reopening the Ridgewell file. If you're willing, we could use your insight." I looked at the message for a long time. I'd left that life for a reason. I'd traded classified missions for coffee and sunlight. Yet, here was again. Darkness knocking politely at my white picket fence. Maybe peace wasn't a place. Maybe it was just a pause between duties. Karen's sentencing day drew a crowd. Reporters filled the steps of the courthouse. Microphones hungry for redemption sound bites. I stayed in the back, hat low, letting the scene play without me. When they brought her out, shackled but defiant, she still managed to look directly at one of the cameras. "I'll rebuild," she said, her voice strained but carrying the old conviction. People like me always do. She wasn't wrong. That's what worried me. Harper later confirmed they found a coded notebook in her safe. List of contacts, payments, symbols matching other pending investigations. She'd been deeper in the network than anyone guessed. But at least for now, the web had a hole in it. Life in Silver Ridge settled again, though normal had changed its definition. One evening, Priya organized a community dinner to celebrate the HOA's new charter, one that limited presidential authority and required every rule to pass majority approval. I went, mostly out of curiosity. Kids chased fireflies. Someone grilled hot dogs. Laughter replaced tension. When Priya handed me the microphone, I hesitated. I'm not much for speeches. I began, but I will say this. Rules are supposed to protect, not control. We forget that when fear wears a friendly face. Karen used rules to build a cage around this neighborhood. You tore it down. That's what matters. They clapped. I stepped back, relieved. Later that night, as I walked home under the lamplight, I saw Leonard sitting on his porch with a cigar. He waved me over. "You ever regret getting involved?" he asked, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Sometimes," I said. "Honestly, peace costs more than you think." He nodded, "But it's worth the receipt." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "It usually is." A week later, I received a call from Harper. "Update on our missing accountant," he said. "Hale's dead. Found in an abandoned warehouse in Phoenix. Gunshot wound. No sign of struggle." My pulse didn't change. I'd been expecting something like that. And Karen, she doesn't know yet. But if this was a cleanup job, she'll never get the chance to rebuild. The network eats its own. "Good," I said softly. After we hung up, I went outside. The night breeze was sharp, clean. The kind of silence that follows justice, heavy but earned. In the distance, the streetlights hummed. I took a deep breath and smiled. Maybe now, finally, the storm had passed. The maple tree rustled overhead. I looked up at its branches, remembering the first day I met her. The pink blazer, the camera, the arrogance. All of it gone, now folded into history like an old violation notice. I pressed a remote. The garage door began to close, its echo rolling out across the quiet cul-de-sac. Order restored, I murmured. And this time it wasn't irony. It was peace. 6 months passed. Spring came back to Silver Ridge Estates like a shy apology. Grass a little greener. Fences freshly painted. Laughter returning to the sidewalks where paranoia used to live. The neighborhood had found its rhythm again. HOA meetings were shorter, friendlier, and filled with more coffee than confrontation. For once, bylaws sounded like background noise instead of threats. Sometimes, when I'd walk my dog down Maple Court, I'd catch a neighbor's smile that lingered longer than usual, a small nod that said, "Thank you for cleaning the rot without burning the house." I never corrected them. What I did wasn't heroism. It was maintenance. The same kind I'd always done, just on a larger, Messier engine. Karen Holbrook, Cara Holman rather, was serving her sentence at a low-security federal facility in Kansas. The papers called her the HOA Queen of Fraud, and apparently, she hated the title. Through the Bureau's grapevine, I learned she'd already tried to manipulate other inmates into starting a community improvement committee. Some people just can't retire from control. But her story didn't end there, and neither did mine. One afternoon, Harper called from D.C. His voice carried that particular tone. Half respect, half trouble. "Cole," he said, "remember that Ridgewell order accountant? Richard Hale, the dead one?" "Yeah." Turns out he wasn't working alone. The network's bigger than we thought. They were using HOAs all over the country. Tiny ones like yours, to funnel microtransactions that went unnoticed by regulators. Low risk, high efficiency. So, Karen was just one gear. Exactly. And that gear squealed. We got warrants in 3 more states now. Your evidence started a chain reaction. I stared at the phone for a moment, the hum of my garage fan filling the silence. "You're welcome," I said dryly. He laughed. "You sure you don't want back in? Desk work. Advisory role. You could train the next batch of agents." "I've trained enough people to know I'd rather talk to engines," I said. "But send me the files. I'll take a look." That evening, I sat at my workbench again, the place where everything started. The Norton sat fully restored now, every bolt shining like it had been waiting for this ending. I turned on the small radio. The old jazz station came through fuzzy but warm. Outside, the sky was the color of cooling steel. As I tightened the final screw on the bike, my mind wandered back to Karen. Her voice, her posture, her unwavering belief that control meant safety. I used to think people like her were the villains of small worlds, the petty tyrants who needed fences more than empathy. But now I understood she wasn't a monster. She was a symptom. There's something about power that makes people forget why they wanted it. At first, it's about fixing things, tidying lawns, improving property values, protecting the community. But somewhere along the way, they start believing the rules are holy, that disobedience equals sin. Karen didn't want order. She wanted worship. And when worship didn't come, she built her own religion, fear. The irony was almost biblical. She tried to weaponize a garage door, and it ended with the FBI walking through hers. Silver Ridge changed in ways I hadn't expected. Without Karen, people talked more. We had block parties again. Leonard started a Fix It Friday, where neighbors brought broken appliances to my garage, and I helped them repair whatever they could carry. It wasn't about the repairs. It was about restoring trust. The place that once caused suspicion had become the community's heartbeat. Priya made good on her promises, too. She pushed through a neighbor mediation policy, replaced fines with community service, and created an anonymous hotline for complaints that actually led to dialogue instead of punishment. It worked. People stopped whispering about each other and started helping instead. The best part? The new HOA motto, carved into the clubhouse wall, order without fear. Every time I walked past it, I couldn't help but smile. Then one morning, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter, handwritten on prison stationery. The return address made my stomach tighten. Federal Correctional Institute, Topeka. Inside was a single page in sharp, slanted handwriting. Daniel, I hope you're satisfied. You humiliated me, destroyed everything I built, and left me rot among people beneath me. But you should know something. I didn't start Ridgewell's game. I ended it once. They pulled me back. You think you stop a crime, but you only clip the branch. The roots are still growing. When I'm out, I'll finish what I started. K. No threats, no apologies, just venom disguised as prophecy. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a folder labeled Archive, and slid it into the filing cabinet beside my workbench. Fear thrives on attention. I wasn't giving it any. Still, part of me knew she was right about one thing. The roots did go deeper. The next day, I called Harper. She wrote to me. I said, let me guess. Cryptic threats, self-pity prophecy? Pretty much. Good. That means she's scared. We've already frozen every known Ridgewell account. She's got nowhere to go when she gets out except back to her own reflection. I said, he chuckled. Keep that poetic streak, Cole. We'll need it when we make the movie. God help them if they cast someone handsome. We laughed, and for a moment, the tension broke. Months later, the Bureau invited me to speak at Quantico, a closed session for new agents on the psychology of deception. I almost declined, but Harper insisted. You've earned a few students, he said, standing in front of that class. Looking at those young faces full of adrenaline and certainty, I told them what Karen had reminded me of. Most criminals don't start as criminals, I said. They start as people who think they're fixing something the world broke. They convince themselves that cutting corners is just efficiency, that lying is strategy, and that control is safety. But every shortcut costs a piece of your soul. By the time you realize how much you paid, the receipt is already stamped. The room was silent. I ended with a small smile. And remember this, sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers. Listen carefully. When I returned home, Silver Ridge was bathed in golden evening light. The kids were setting up lemonade stands. Neighbors were chatting on porches. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the America we promised ourselves still exists, somewhere between fences and forgiveness. I stood in my driveway, mug of coffee in hand, watching the maple tree rustle. It had grown a bit taller, casting longer shadows across the asphalt. Life goes on, quietly, persistently, beautifully. Inside the garage, the Norton sat gleaming, ready for its first real ride. I slipped on my leather gloves, swung my leg over the seat, and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. Steady, strong, clean, I rode through Silver Ridge, slowly passing houses that looked brighter than I remembered. At the end of the cul-de-sac, a sign caught my eye. Community open house. All welcome. Karen would have hated that word. Welcome. It was too uncontrollable, too democratic. The thought made me laugh. When I reached the main road, I stopped for a moment, looking back at a neighborhood that had tested and taught me more than any federal operation ever had. I'd come here for peace and ended up rediscovering purpose. Funny how the two can overlap when you least expect it. Then I whispered, permission granted, and opened the throttle. The road stretched ahead, wide and waiting. Sometimes, life puts you face to face with people who thrive on power, rules, and fear. They'll try to control you, intimidate you, or make you question your right to peace. Don't let them. The truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. Justice isn't revenge. It's responsibility. It's documenting the facts, staying calm under pressure, and believing that doing the right thing doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. If you've ever dealt with your own HOA Karen, remember, patience is a weapon and integrity is armor. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and share your own story about standing up to injustice. Don't forget to subscribe for more true inspired HOA dramas, because sometimes the quietest garage hides the loudest truth.